Well, hello there and welcome to The Full View. This is On the Record here, and today we're talking about many institutions, many of whom of higher education have reached a crisis point, and that comes to accommodation levels in the country. From rural to urban South Africa, the tapestry of neighborhoods is fast changing. This as entrepreneurs cash in on the shortage of student accommodation.
The ever-increasing demand for higher education, coupled with the need to house students, many have had to resort to living off campus, with most raising safety concerns. Living far away from campuses poses another serious challenge.
I think it's better on campus, because off-campus accommodation, some of them are far away from the campus, and we find out the transport is not available. You have to walk. Like 5 kilometers, 4 kilometers, something like that.
Yeah, I'd rather be on campus, but it's just I run late of registration. Yeah, I become late. So, but I rather stay on campus because it's quick and fast, and yeah, there are no complications on campus. Yeah.
The reason most of the time we stay off campus is because of the deposit fee required on campus, which is around, I think it is 1.2 when I'm not mistaken. So most of us can't afford that amount. So we prefer off-campus.
While financing issues grip institutions countrywide, those in urban areas have a further burden of a shortage of land.
The demand for accommodation is tremendous. So we get about 13,000 applications for 6,700 beds. We've done 3 things, but we still need to do more in the long term. So in the long term, we're talking to the city and we're talking to the province, and we're trying to work with them to get new buildings refurbished so that can be turned into student accommodation.
From the cities to the townships, the shortage of student accommodation is the same. Many entrepreneurs have decided to enter the space and cash in.
Sometimes we struggle with the payments of NSFAS. They don't deposit the monies in the accounts of the students. So we had last year we had a student that stayed with us for 6 months, not being allocated the funds. So we never expelled the student. So the student is still with us even this year. So NSFAS is we have a problem of money allocations.
From the very basic structures to the utmost accredited, an opportunity of making extra cash. But it comes at a price. A few years ago, several students living off campus from various universities in the country were attacked and some killed. Previously, government responded by encouraging a public-private partnership model to help institutions build new accommodation. This has not yielded positive results for all.
We did our own feasibility study on a possible private-public partnership. Unfortunately, the model that came out there, or the results of our investigation, were such that because you're going into it with business people, they want to make profits. And what our students were expected to pay back, it's something which they could not afford. That's why that fell through. So we're no longer on a public-private partnership, but instead what we have done, we went into another feasibility study with the assistance of the Department of Higher Education and Training to see if we cannot go out, because we've got plans, we've got everything, we've got land, like you say, to now approach private funders to assist us. And we are at an advanced stage. The first phase, which should start this year, we're going to start putting up 3,500 rooms. That is our first phase. And with that, I think we will get somewhere with it.
Government now says it has a 10-year infrastructure plan.
In the next 10 years, we have an infrastructure initiative to build 300,000 more places for accommodation in higher education institutions.
While authorities are still grappling with their plan, in other areas, the need to fill the accommodation gap is creating more problems.
What has changed the fabric of our community is more illegal land use, slumlords, and some students that live in digs, but it's not overall a student problem. It's an illegal development problem. It's an infrastructure problem. We have a severe problem with infrastructure where water, sewage and electricity can't keep pace with all these students moving into the area.
While this crisis plays itself out, some will have to sleep wherever they can until they qualify. Mahla Kokomane, SABC News, Johannesburg.
So as we mentioned, the accommodation crisis is mostly affecting students who are coming from far-off provinces and are from all over the world. The universities in South Africa, mostly the public institutions, accept a huge number of students while knowing that they cannot afford to accommodate them all in their residences. Should universities take full responsibility for their students? Joining us to answer this, Dr. Diane Parker, Deputy Director General, University Education, Department of Higher Education and Training in the middle there, and Professor Stanley Mukhola, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Teaching, Learning and Technology, and Acting DVC Student Affairs and Extracurricular Affairs to her left, and to my immediate left is Wandile Ngcwaneni, who is co-author and co-editor. We are no longer at ease. The struggle for fees, hashtag fees must fall. A very good evening to all of you. Let me perhaps start with you, Dr. Parker. Should it be the preserve of universities? Should it entirely be your responsibility to house and accommodate students?
No, I don't think it should be. Universities are primarily institutions of teaching, learning and researching. They do have some responsibility for ensuring that students can be accommodated, and that's particularly young, vulnerable students coming into the institution for the first time, first year students, second year students and so on. They do need to have accommodation for them. Our universities weren't built with that in mind, so it is difficult because we're now in a situation where the context has changed completely and we're bringing far more young, vulnerable students into our system.
I must ask this though, when you look at your formula of how many students you accept into an academic year, where does the breakdown begin on how many you feel obligated to accommodate?
So when we did the student housing review, the ministerial report in 2011, there was a suggestion that it would depend on the context of the institution as to how many students the institution ought to be creating student housing for. Say, for example, in some of our deep rural areas, University of Limpopo as an example, University of Zululand on the, not the Richards Bay campus, the other campus, there is no other suitable housing around really.
Okay,
and so there we need 80 to 100% of students accommodated, whereas in an urban area, it's more like 30%.
Sorry to rush you, but in a word, is it 2/3? Is it a third? How many do you believe you feel obligated to accommodate?
I don't think it's an obligation. I think it's actually something that we got to do as a country to ensure that we
Mr.
support those students.
What are your thoughts and what is the reality? You have obviously written a book with other students and other thought leaders within the education sphere. What are their thoughts? Is it the university's responsibility?
The reality is that universities are not taking themselves seriously. They are not taking students seriously. They take more and more students every year, but they expect, I don't know where they expect them to live. Another thing is that government, or I guess spatial planning in South Africa then comes into question as well. This is because where universities are located, the municipalities within where universities are located then do not accommodate the idea that there is going to need to be accommodation.
So Dr. Parker
students.
is saying is that they feel at least vulnerable students such as first years should be accommodated where they can. Is that the reality? What are the students that you've been talking to saying?
Well, yes, students need to be accommodated.
I'm asking, is it the reality from the ones you've spoken to? Are first years being accommodated?
No. So it comes, number one, university is expensive. So universities are expensive. Accommodation is expensive. There is a reality of many young people coming into university where they come from a shack and they find themselves at the University of Johannesburg, and then they end up living in squalor again because they didn't get access to a residence.
Professor Mukhola, the thinking is that South Africa in transition, if it's going to look at inequalities, the frame from which we have looked at this discussion has been inequalities in terms of educational barriers, but we're not looking at material barriers such as this. So is it not a moral responsibility of universities to be encouraging that more and more students are accommodated?
So thank you very much for the question. I can tell you, maybe just to give you a context of TUT, we accommodate about 65,000 students overall.
Which and is a percentage of how many?
In the residences, only 33% are in the residence, which is about 21,000 of the 65,000. And this is students who are dispersed across all our campuses, the city campus, township campus, and distant campuses. Our major challenge, however, is in the township, where we are not able to identify suitable accommodation to bring our students on board. And again, our students are faced with a lot of challenges of safety, because now they would like to come and study on campus. When they finish studying, they must go back to their township to find a place to sleep. So in between, they face challenges. This I will see that now towards examination, these students will tell us, open your library 24/7, so that they can study and only go home in the morning.
And that's the thing, the relationship between their safety and their academic performance. Yes. This university would like to see students pass. So the question then becomes, shouldn't they then play a much more active role in ensuring their safety?
We're trying our best in SABC, because as much as we want to, but resources are not actually in our favor. For instance, like I said now, if you take Swashangwe, for instance, we've got 15,000 students. Only 4,000 are in the residences. The rest are distributed across the township. If we had resources, like we are trying to what to do now, I just tell Dr. Paga that this evening that we are now approving what we call now
Professor
communal.
Hold the thought, because we've got some of our viewers who are contributing to this discussion. Some tweets are coming through. We've also seen some voice notes on this question, whether or not universities should be held fully responsible for the accommodation of students. This one is from BUQ saying, no, in most normal countries, students have to make their own plan, but South Africans seem to think that everything must be handed to them on a plate. This one is from Zandi saying, we're talking fourth industrial revolution. Thought online courses will be the in thing. Accommodation should not be an issue in the near future. And Steve says cities, governments and learning institutions should share costs. Money should be spent providing good quality education, hybrid solutions. In other words, examples, government buildings, cities maintain and schools allocate. We'll be back on the record in just a moment.